Good afternoon. It's Wednesday, the 24th of May, 2017, just after 1 o'clock. Welcome to UK Column News. I'm your host, Brian Gerrish, with me in the studio, Mike Robinson. And we're delighted to say that we have got with us today Patrick Henningsen from 21st Century Wire. And we've also got Alex Thomson speaking to us from the Netherlands with Eastern Approaches. Well, what's the latest message? The latest message from our government. Do we have a government?
We have a government. We don't have a parliament.
We have a government. We don't have a parliament. But the latest message from Theresa May is it could happen anywhere. And of course, the terror risk at the moment is critical. So let's have a look at how the BBC approaches things. So we just thought we'd take a little bit of a snapshot from the BBC. And it's all here. It says an attack may be imminent. PM terror threat speech in full, 4 victims of attack named, what we know about the attacker, kids were running out crying. And then of course on the right hand side we've got some of Britain's finest police. That's the headlines there that I've just read through. And let's have a look at these men. We've got scruffy tattooed individuals in baseball caps with automatic weapons, paramilitary uniforms, paramilitary police patrolling what, where and why. I mean, what's really going on here, Mike? We seem to just be having these police driven across to becoming paramilitary police. Look at the tattoos and the state of the individual on the left. Worked in McDonald's for a few years. Now he's toting around the streets with an automatic weapon. And what are they looking for and what are they protecting? I'm getting puzzled by this.
Yeah. Yes. Well, will we look at what Theresa May actually said then? Let's do that. It remains the case, apparently, that other than the terrorist himself, 22 people were killed in the attack, 59 people remain injured, and many of them have life-threatening conditions. She said, as Greater Manchester Police confirmed earlier today, the perpetrator was Salman Ramadan Abedi, a 22-year-old who was born and brought up in Britain. The Joint Terrorism Analysis Centre has now concluded, on the basis of today's investigations, that the threat level should be increased for the time being from severe to critical. As a result of the JTAC's decision, police have asked for authorization from the Secretary of State for Defence to deploy a number of armed military personnel in support of their armed officers. This request is part of a well-established plan known as Operation Temporer. The Secretary of State for Defence has approved this request and Operation Temporer is now in force. This means that armed police officers responsible for duties such as guarding key sites will be replaced by members of the armed forces, which will allow the police to significantly increase the number of armed officers on patrol. So basically, the army is going to look after, for example, I suppose, nuclear installations, nuclear power stations and so on, and armed police that would otherwise be there will now be on the streets, Brian.
It's fascinating, and I'll just come back to this business. We haven't recalled Parliament to have any form of debate about this, so the public gets an insight into why these decisions are being made, who's saying what. We've had a meeting behind closed doors, certainly not going to be any minutes coming out into the public arena, and now we've got troops on the streets. I don't remember during the height of the IRA bombings that we're seeing armed police, armed troops on the streets in this way. So why has this happened? Public unable to ask any questions because we don't have a parliament. What we've got here is a Theresa May dictatorship.
Well, Brian, you don't need to worry because apparently you may also see military personnel deployed at certain events, helping the police keep the public safe. In all circumstances, members of the armed forces will be under the command of police officers.
This doesn't fill me with great confidence because I simply come back to the de Menezes incident and Cressida Dick and people having 7 bullets put in their heads. Never any proper explanation of that. There used to be, it was black humour, but people would say, is there anything more dangerous than a sailor with an automatic weapon? But I look at what our police are capable of at the moment, and this is extremely dangerous precedents, but made by Theresa May, Michael Fallon, and other unnamed individuals behind closed doors.
So let's just put that one back up for a second, because let's consider the implications of this. Members of the armed forces will be under the command of police officers. So what we're seeing is a merging of the command and control structures of the military and the police. Am I wrong in that, Brian?
No, you're absolutely
right. It can't operate in any other way.
It's blatant, Mike.
Okay.
It's blatant.
So let me bring this up. This is the European Defence Agency, European Defence Matters, November 2015. And they were saying at that time that European defence faces challenges today, even more tomorrow. Challenges will require capabilities that address diverse threats and maintain Europe's technological edge within constrained budgets. The European Defence Agency was created 10 years ago, that was in 2015, to support and enhance cooperation between the member states, and it's providing an important catalyst to pooling and sharing defence and security capabilities. And at this meeting, Federica Mogherini, who's on the right side there, sitting beside Jens Stoltenberg from NATO, she, in her keynote speech, echoed sentiments, suggested that there was a need to, it was more than a suggestion, there's a need to blur the lines between civilian and military institutions. She was absolutely clear that the police should be militarised. So this was November 2015, European policy being presented by the European Defence Agency. Let's not forget who the biggest funder of the European Defence Agency is. It's Britain. And fast forward a year and a half, and Alex, we now have what looks like exactly what she was predicting, the merging of military and civilian institutions, and a unified command and control centre seems to be on the cards. But the question is this going to be a permanent thing? Or is it going to be a temporary thing? Or is it going to be like the French, where they say it's going to be temporary, but in fact it's permanent?
Most likely the third of those, Mike. Here on the continent, it is routine because they don't have a Bill of Rights tradition as we and the Americans do. It's routine to deploy soldiers for fixed patrols at fixed buildings, not just the nuclear installations, by the way, but also city centre, railway stations, airports, so that you see them popping up everywhere, France and Belgium, Germany increasingly. This is prohibited by what the Americans call posse comitatus. But although the term is American, it applies to all the common law jurisdictions. Now, I saw JTAC being set up, and I wasn't very impressed with them in the early days, particularly, for example, when they did annual country reviews of the likelihood of Islamic terrorism in each country. And for Iceland, they wrote one year, "No terrorists here because it's too cold." That's the majestic analysis of JTAC, which has now put the country up to critical. But this Operation Tempera, yes, it has been around for a number of years, like a lot of army plans are, but it is a way of invoking civil contingencies by decree in the absolute absence of Parliament. Parliament has been prorogued. There is no, as you say, we have this fiction that Parliament equals government in Britain. No, the government operates by royal prerogative, even if they are MPs. And you see that clearly at a time like this. They're the government acting in the Crown's name without the people or Parliament endorsing them. And if they invoke civil contingencies, it jolly well ought to be debated in Parliament. But then, of course, we would see the fearsome text of the Act come through, and that would really get some nerves jarred, even journalists in London. And so to avoid that, Operation Tempera is presented as if it were the army putting into practice long-established plans, and then people, especially those who support the armed forces, are perhaps less likely to raise a hue and cry about it. But as the chat box is saying, this is a necessary step towards the EU or continentalisation of Britain's police. And at the moment, we're told it is British or English and Welsh police and British Armed Forces, but both of these in their separate routes can easily be merged into EU bodies, Europol and or EUGENT4 on the police side and the European Unified Military on the other. And then all that will change will be the faces. Not even the badges will change. So we're being subjected fully to the flagrant breach of the Bill of Rights and really being terrorised by our own military or someone else's.
Patrick, have you any thoughts on this?
I think looking at this, what I see and what you've covered over the years on all these programs is everything seems to be already in place in advance. The migration of services and the consolidation of departments and resources, state resources, and the European integration on so many levels seems to already be in place. All that's required is a trigger event. And so, isn't it how convenient these trigger events are coming at regular intervals? And what we see is the agenda just moving along nicely to where it's going. So, look at the reaction to this event. You just have to look at the reaction to this event. And the reaction by the state is a ramping up of a militarized police state. And the restriction, I would probably expect, restriction of right, or the expectation that rights and privacy will be restricted in some way by the state in the interests of national security and for the common good, as the leadership might call it. So the other thing that's coming down the pipeline is this will also be, if the election it does come back. I know I'm going off on a segue here, but when the election campaigning does resume, neither candidate will be able to campaign on anything less than an aggressive policy for increased military operations, specifically in Syria. So that's what we can expect going forward. So how this benefits allegedly the Islamic State is anyone's guess. If that indeed is the narrative that's being woven through this event.
If I just come in, we'll come back on that, Patrick. I think you've hit the nail on the head. Of course, what the UK column has been warning about for years now is the fact that these policies have been brought in by stealth. We have labelled it many times as subversion. We're seeing our constitution, we're seeing the inner part of this country dismantled from within. That has been a process that has been handled by both the Labour, Lib Dem and Conservative parties. This is a cross-party agenda to actually destroy this country from the inside. And of course, if you're going to do that sort of thing, you're going to try and protect yourself by removing some of the protections of the treason, of the charge of treason. That's exactly what Tony Blair tried to do. That's why Tony Blair said that one of the things he regretted was the Freedom of Information Act, because that act allowed people to really delve into what the government was doing. We warned and warned about the fact this malicious political charity Common Purpose was working out of the office of the Deputy Prime Minister at the time. That was Mr. Prescott. We warned about Francis Maud helping this organisation to train the top 200 civil servants. This is subversion, it's treason. Now just have a look at this, and we've got to say a big thank you to one of our viewers that emailed this in this morning. They said, you need to have a look at this bill which is coming through, the Armed Forces Deployment Royal Prerogative Bill. This is in sort of stasis at the moment while we have the election process in place. This is a coup. This is the Conservatives under Theresa May attempting a coup without any doubt. If we try and expand a bit of that on screen, we've got pre-deployment approval. So what's this about? Sorry, it's make provision for the approval required for deployment of Her Majesty's Armed Forces by the Prime Minister in the event of conflict overseas. Now this is very interesting wording because it says conflict overseas, but when you get into this proposed bill, you start to see that that's a very muddy definition. And just to be clear here, we've only had this document in front of us for a little bit under an hour this morning, so we're going to encourage you to get online, go to www.parliament.k to have a look at it. But let's have a look at this bit here, which is really stunning. Should be able to expand it. Yep. So we're on to approval, exceptions to requirement for approval, emergencies and security issues. Approval is not required for a conflict decision if the emergency condition or security condition in this section is met. So note that we've gone from overseas deployments to emergencies. And if we then scroll through, this is the bit that the person said, look at section 3. Sorry, just call this up and have a look at this. So in subsection 5, it is for the Prime Minister to determine if the emergency condition or the security condition is met.
That's an enabling act, Brian. That's the sort of thing Hitler would have been delighted
Well,
about.
it's an enabling act, and somebody in our chat box has pointed out in the last few moments that apparently Macron has either done it or is pushing for the French state of emergency to be pushed ahead to the 1st of November. So let's remember that France is already in a state of emergency. That's effectively paramilitary control. David Cameron locked us into a 50-year pact with the French, British-French military, and now we've got, by stealth, Theresa May. This is a coup.
Alex.
This is unlawful as a bill, and if Her Majesty signs it with royal assent, or she doesn't even sign it, she lets a friend, so-called in the Lords, say Lorraine Levelte, the Queen wishes it. If she gives royal assent, she will have broken her coronation oath. Since the Williamite settlement of 1689, the crown is offered to its incumbent on the basis of honouring the treaty, not the law, the treaty that was signed in 1689 called the Declaration of Right, which was then put into statute in Scotland as the Claim of Right and in England as the Bill of Rights. And the relevant wording, which comes straight from the treaty, the Declaration, I'll read it from the Bill of Rights, is whereas the late King James II, by the assistance of divers evil counsellors, judges, and ministers, did endeavour to subvert and extirpate the Protestant religion and the laws of liberties of this kingdom by raising and keeping a standing army within this kingdom in time of peace without consent of Parliament. Therefore, the raising of keeping of a standing army within the kingdom in time of peace, unless it be with consent of Parliament, is against law. Her Majesty will be breaking her coronation oath and therefore forfeiting once again her right to rule over us if she signs that.
That is pretty clear, but of course Bill of Rights doesn't exist as far as present politicians are concerned, and they want to bring in a new Bill of Rights. But Alex, what this absolutely demonstrates is once again another of the risks that we face if Theresa May is re-elected as Prime Minister.
Absolutely. I think only David Ellis has really been covering this, but the Conservatives are basically not campaigning. They're assuming that they will get a minimum turnout in the right constituencies, really to let Theresa May glide through. And if you look at the Conservative manifesto, it's Theresa May's team. People are being encouraged to vote not even for the Conservative Party, but for Theresa May's team. And as Guido Fawkes at order.com has reported, Conservative parliamentary candidates who are now being selected centrally by CCHQ are being told, you are Theresa's local representative.
Yeah. Patrick, this is an ongoing argument in the United States as well, particularly it was under Obama. I haven't heard whether there's been any further discussion under Trump, but there has been this argument between the executive, the presidency, and the Congress for some time about who has the right to take the United States to war.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the United States is technically under a state of the emergency. So, in terms of the War Powers Act in the U.S. or the requirement that Congress would declare war, and that's pretty much gone by and by in favor of what's now known as the authorization of military force. And so built into the National Defense Authorization Act is a sort of like running state of emergency, which was renewed recently. And then we also have, before that, the Patriot Acts, which act in a similar way. So this is sort of a runaround of the constitutional process, but can only be achieved under what's perceived as a state of emergency or some sort of a state of threat to national security. And so in September 11, 2001, pretty much locked that in place. So this is the war on terror. So here we are, how many years later? In 2017, 16 years later, the war on terror is still the dominant paradigm. It's still the dominant narrative that's driving governments in the West, particularly the United States, Britain, and the NATO member states. So this is their sort of defining principle, if you will, of how they're engaging with the rest of the world and how they're engaging with their own citizens is under this basis. So, is it constitutional? No, it's not constitutional in terms of the U.S. Is it lawful? That's debatable. It depends what you consider lawful. So it also depends. The debate we're not having is, are we under attack? Are we in a state of emergency? Are we in a state of war? And I can tell you, having just come from a war zone, I would hardly call what happened in Westminster an attack on Britain. Um, I'm sorry if anybody is offended by that, but someone in a car and running around with a kitchen knife isn't exactly an attack on the country. It's an attack of sorts, but it's not the same as being at war. So that's something I think can put things in proper perspective. Is the reaction by the state, does it measure up, or does it equate to the size of the threat or the nature of the threat? That's a debate that really should be happening in the intellectual circles and political circles in this country and in the U.S. and other places, but it's not happening right now. That debate is completely off limits and totally out of bounds as far as the mainstream establishment is concerned.
Yeah. Okay. Thanks for that, Patrick. Now, a correction from yesterday's program, and I do apologize for this. Yesterday we said that that this RT video showing a drill taking place in Manchester had happened on May the 11th, and in fact, of course, it did, but not in 2017. It was in 2016. A slightly amusing aspect of this was that apparently last night on ITV News, Rachel Younger also mentioned that there had been a drill a few days ago in Manchester. So, Rachel, I want to apologise to all our viewers and listeners for that slight mistake yesterday, but I particularly want to apologise to you if it was me that caused you to also say that there was a drill had taken place in Manchester a week or so ago. I do apologise.
Yeah, well, is she watching the programme? We certainly know that an increasing number of so-called mainstream journalists are.
And we'll just make the point that it was this organisation that was running that drill in Manchester just over a year ago. Anybody wants to go and have a look at their website. It's very interesting. But let's move on and see what's next. We'll go to Tommy Robinson. Now he has released a piece of video, a report, and we're going to look at a couple of little snippets out of this and comment on them. So let's have a look at the first one.
Our politicians have sold us now. They're working hand in hand with radical extremists, and what you saw last night is the end outcome of that. Years and years and years of radicalisation, extremism that our politicians have allowed to happen.
So there we have Tommy Robinson standing outside a mosque in Manchester, and I think the key point here, Brian, is he's saying that our politicians have allowed what took place in Manchester to happen.
Yeah, this for me is a very important point. I'm going to say a little bit more about Tommy Robinson in a minute, and we've got a little bit more to see. But basically, it is not a case that they've allowed it to happen. The situation in this country has been deliberately engineered by our own politicians. This is a process that's gone on many, many years. We can start before the Second World War, we can go back longer, but we can certainly say that immediately post Second World War, huge changes in this country, including immigration. And what I'm very comfortable in saying, it's very interesting, these people were invited into the country, they were invited in. So I would just start to say to Tommy Robinson, let's start to focus on who caused the situation in this country, how was it put together, and let's start focusing our attention on those people, but more on that in a minute.
But Patrick, of course, it goes beyond them just being invited into the country. Of course, people are increasingly being driven in this direction from both sub-Saharan Africa and from the Middle East.
Yeah. Firstly, the migrant crisis narrative, as it's commonly known as, the biggest corridor of mass migration into Europe has been through North Africa, and specifically through the country of Libya, which is effectively a failed state. The reason for that, and the thing we don't hear on Radio 4 every morning, and we're not hearing through any of this analysis, especially as the so-called bomber, the alleged bomber of the Manchester event, is of Libyan extraction or Libyan descent. Is what caused the failed state of Libya, basically, what caused the collapse of Libya. But this bomber's family didn't even come from the failed state of Libya. They came supposedly fleeing the Gaddafi regime a long time ago, his family. So it's not even relevant to this conversation with Libya. But the collapse of Libya is a direct result of NATO, US-led, British-led, French-led foreign policy. The other big corridor is from Syria. That war has been maintained and exacerbated by foreign policies of the United States, of UK and France mainly, and their Gulf partners, Saudi Arabia and Qatar. Again, no critique of this. So what we have is a lot of angry people in Britain who are scratching their heads and want to be angry at something. And I guess it's just too much to turn too much of their anger towards the foreign policy and what our governments and militaries are doing overseas. Instead, this is kind of cannibalization of society, where divide and rule, where people are just ripping each other's to pieces, and these irrational reactions to something that happened, like the event in Manchester a couple of nights ago. So, are you really going to get to the bottom of the problem here? That's a big question that needs to be asked. I don't think so, based on what I've seen so far.
Okay, thank you for that, Patrick. And I'll just bring in, we should remember, of course, the UN Special Representative for Migration, Peter Sutherland, who was saying that we need to, quote, increase mass migration, we need to encourage mass migration to, quote, undermine the homogeneity of European countries. So we can see that there is a political drive to create this situation, and then, of course, once that situation is created, we've got distressed people, we've got people who are going to align with extremist groups in order to get back somehow at the situation that is causing them pain. And I note that we're already getting some response to our discussion where people are saying, yes, but these people are attacking us. Well, we need to establish who is attacking whom and why they're doing it. And too often we're seeing people jumping onto the bandwagon rather than analysing who's caused the problem.
Yeah, I mean, none of what we're saying precludes a criminal investigation and
Absolutely.
people being held to account for criminality. That's a completely different issue. What we're talking about is dealing with the cause of the problem in the first place.
Yeah.
Now let's go on with Tommy Robinson and see what else he had to say.
When you see these communities and you see these houses, you think this is a British community, or you might have British Muslims. They are enemy combatants in these houses. In these houses are enemy combatants who want to kill you, maim you, and destroy you. They want to destroy our way of life.
Alex, enemy combatants. This, to me, Alex, this reminds me very strongly of Samuel Huntington and the Clash of Civilizations. He's arguing that we won't be fighting wars based on nation states and borders and fronts anymore. That we'll be moving to the situation of not knowing who our enemy is. Actually, our enemy will be mixed in amongst us in our own communities. And this seems to be what Tommy Robinson is expressing here. But he's expressing that, and almost, to me, it seemed almost suggesting that every neighbour is a threat, and we've got to do something about that. And that makes me feel a little uncomfortable, shall we say?
Yes, well, the phrase enemy combatants comes from US Army training and FEMA training since 9/11 and the Department of Homeland Security was set up and so on. And in the same bracket are the concepts of shelter in place and obligatory transport to a place of safety and so on. So it's all about legitimizing the roundup of people in countries supposedly subject to the rule of law and common law, and interning them and terrorizing them. Tommy is, like me, a Bedfordshire boy, and I grew up very close to him in time and space, just a few miles away. he takes great glee, and I think he's right, in accusing most of us who grew up in the mid-Bedfordshire, the area just north of Luton, of never going into Luton to see the problems. Well, my dad and I are exceptions. We had a lot to do with Pakistani Muslims in Luton, have a great deal of time for them, and vice versa. My dad particularly was well respected among them before he retired. And I know that Tommy Robinson, Stephen Yaxley, his real name, is telling the truth about the serious problems in Luton with a lot of Muslims. And he's telling the truth also about the dirty war played by the state in allowing this to fester, particularly by execrable Bedfordshire police in Luton. But I had detected with his book, and which you're about to mention, actually, and also with his biography coming out and his videos, that I thought he was getting more serious. But now it seems that the turns of phrase he's dropping in are not actually his own intellectual phrases. He's a bright boy himself, but they're actually being fed to him by neocons. And I think the proof of this is if you see he's become the head of the three-person franchise of the Canadian headquartered Rebel Media now. I respect them for a lot of what they do, but look at Rebel Media UK's trio. You've got Tommy Robinson as the big draw, and he's flanked there by Holly Henderson and Quillan Robertson. I mean, just have a look at these two people on Rebel Media UK. They've taken Tommy, supposedly the rising star of thinking about Islam, and they've sandwiched him between a pretty boy and a bimbo. I can't take the guy seriously anymore.
Patrick, have you any thoughts on Rebel Media?
I think it's the timing of them is interesting. They've sort of emerged and kind of piggybacked off InfoWars and really rode the wave of this alt-right trend that sort of has ascended during the Trump campaign and into the Trump presidency. But I was always a little bit, I don't know, in my opinion, some of the presentations they do are a little bit manipulative. And they sort of advertise themselves as, taking on political correctness, for instance, which a lot of people might agree with. But then it's moves into this very sort of intense fear of Muslims and Islam. And again, with little or no critique of the geopolitical scope, or the looking at the actual results of foreign policies or clandestine operations by Western intelligence agencies, for instance, that's causing some of the militant terrorist groups that are well funded and well armed around the world, plus our business relationships with Saudi Arabia and Qatar, for instance. So it's a dumbed down sort of analysis that they provide. It's completely emotive. It's devoid of any real detail. And so it doesn't also look at what the state are doing, like, for instance, the PREVENT strategy. And before that, the forerunner to PREVENT, the Channel Project by the Metropolitan Police, which was designed to sort of identify young potential Islamic radicals. But what we're finding and what we're hearing with a lot of the criticism of it, that it's actually winding up radicalization of young people. And then we have hundreds, or if not thousands, of people from Britain and many thousands more from France and other European countries who the authorities and the security services claim they know are fighting with ISIS in Syria or in Iraq. So if they know the numbers, if they have a calculation and they have a tally of how many British, French, Dutch, Swedish, German are all going to fight in Syria or in Iraq for the so-called Islamic State, then they must know who these people are if they have a head count. And so how are they allowed to go back and forth almost so freely and so seamlessly to be able to travel between the Middle East and European countries? I don't see any of these questions or any of this sort of inquiry mounted by people like the Rebel Media or angry pundits like Tommy Robinson. And I think they should. I think they should look a little bit deeper. The problem is with looking deeper is it's hard work. It takes longer, it takes more research, and you really have to apply yourself in a way that's just not emotive, or it's not straight off the headlines of a tabloid. And so it's in that way, I think that they are falling short of the mark in terms of really looking at the full scope of this problem that we're faced with, both at home and abroad. And they're really stuck in a world of the narrative of 1984. I remember when the Queen gave Barack Obama visited with the First Lady visited the Buckingham Palace, the Queen presented a copy of George Orwell's 1984 to the U.S. president. And that's where we are right now. It's Emmanuel Goldstein at home, and it's Oceana abroad. We're absolutely in 1984 right now. And I would like to hear that coming from some of these people who are angry and sort of ranting right now post Manchester.
Yeah, really good point that to get to the real truth about what's happening, you've got to work extremely hard and you've got to do your research. We just finished this segment, but to say that UK Column is not going to shy away from this subject. We have to stay focused on the people causing the problem, and that's our politicians. Sorry, Mike, let's just have a look. This is Tommy Robinson's book, Enemy of the State. I have read this book. I believe that you have as well, Alex, and I say to the audience today, if you haven't read the book, perhaps you should read the book, because then we know the man that we're talking about. I've put a header in there, analysis of Tommy Robinson, misplaced outrage. This is just a couple of my thoughts on this man. I do not believe he's a racist. If you read the book, he talks about having friends across a wide range of different backgrounds and identities. He's a gutsy man. He stood up to be counted, and I've no doubt that he's done that because he believes in what he says he does. He believes in himself, but that takes guts. He's been smashed by the state. If you read it, he talks about the police coming on to him. He's been put in prison. He's had his family threatened and attacked by the state as well. This is all very typical. Many, many people coming forward talking about this. And of course, once this happens to you, you are out for blood because you want to know why it's happened to you and who's caused the problem. But in my opinion, Tommy Robinson at the moment is unable to understand what has caused the subversive changes in society that he's now suffering from. And we can add to that, he's clearly angry. You can see the anger in the videos, and he's too quick to blame anyone but the criminal, child abusing politicians, because that's the reality of the matter, who have created this dangerous mess in the first place. So we're seeing here much too quick to focus on one group of people, and what that does is protects the very politicians we need to expose.
But Alex, it seems like the sort of moves to get trouble between Muslims and other sections of society is happening in the Netherlands as well.
Yes, last Saturday we had a white non-Muslim and I think non-religious policewoman in Amsterdam East, which is the biggest concentration of Turks and Moroccans in the country, out on her beat, and she off her own bat put on a hijab. You can see at bottom right there. And you can see this was all carefully conceived of. A Turk who is a Labour councillor for Amsterdam Council was tweeting this and said, how wonderful. So it was obviously a pre-planned photo op. And Amsterdam police were caught on the back foot on Twitter because people were asking, constitutionally, is she a policewoman if she's putting this on, because she's no longer a representative of the state in the proper uniform. Now, I know that policemen are not representative of the state, but I'm afraid in the Napoleonic tradition they are. But so you've got to like that and lump it. She was wearing something, apparently the ostensible reason was to show how good and virtue signalling she was. But actually, as a lot of people tweeted out in Dutch afterwards, what she'd done was start little riots behind her wherever she went. So it was a police beat that was actually causing more problem than it was solving.
Okay, thank you for that, Brian.
Well, we're just follow on again with AV8, where we have to wait for the actual DVDs to come out of the talk, covering the talks from AV8. But I thought we'd just post this one up on screen for Patrick Henningsen, because of course what Patrick was talking about was fake news, and the headline on screen there, of course, is fake radio war stirs terror through US. And the point that Patrick was making of the power of the media to stir up emotions, to terrorise the public, cause unrest or whatever. And coming up, we've got the media on trial. This is at Frome. It's on Sunday, the 11th of June at 7 p.m. Patrick and Vanessa Beeley talking. These are very, very important meetings. If you want to understand what's really going on as opposed to what the BBC says, then you need to attend events like this to learn. And of course, you can ask questions, which is so important. Just to also say that the team in Cornwall, down in Penzance, doing a great job. Thursday, May the 25th, 7:30 in the Lugger, which is on the Promenade, Penzance. They are talking about austerity and the national debt, the big lie. And we added to that yesterday by showing that the government is using Rothschilds in order to make decisions on the banking industry. Totally independent, of course, Mike. So if you get time, get down to the Lugger, support that very good local group, and ask all the questions you wish about austerity.
Hustings, Brian, we're not going to bother with them.
I don't think we should. Why have we come up with this headline? Well, we got a wonderful email in today. If I can just read that. It says, I'm aware that a couple of people are away for a few days, but I thought it would be worthy of comment that one of our merry band here in Milton Keynes North was told by a Labour prospective parliamentary candidate that there was to be no hustings in MK North. I put the question to my local UKIP candidate and he confirmed that he knows of none arranged so far. I asked the reporting desk twice at our local newspaper, The Citizen. On both occasions they said they'd heard nothing like that and would get back to me. They haven't as yet. Milton Keynes North and South has two Conservative Party representatives, but clearly they don't feel the need for a, quote, job interview, unquote, on this occasion. Very, very interesting email. Thank you very much for that. So why bother with hustings?
Well, indeed, or even why bother campaigning? Because Alex, New Statesman here saying, the headline is, believe it or not, but the Tories are running an energetic election campaign. You just can't see it. The party is eschewing high-profile appearances in favour of targeted ads online. But we don't get the opportunity to answer questions under these circumstances.
No, questions is what they fear because, of course, people are asking us, including UKIP branches, can we have killer questions to put to candidates about EU military union, or indeed about, in Scotland, about the contempt of court of the Scottish ministers over the Holly Gregg case and the Information Commissioner. And I'm afraid you won't get a chance to do that because, as the New Statesman is saying, only people are being targeted socio-economically and geographically only online, so that their social media will show targeted ads with nasty smears without the other groups in the community becoming aware and deciding not to vote for that party. Private Eye, which I got on my last visit to Britain, has a great cartoon here in the middle, Desperate Business. And it says, a campaigner at the door with a rosette on says, lastly, sir, how did you hear about us? And the guy who's opened his front door to the canvasser says, dunno, I think I was psychologically targeted via social media. I think there's a lot of truth to that. Incidentally, just yesterday, my postal ballot came, because I'm still registered to vote in Cheltenham. Interestingly, that the Labour candidate lives in Eldorado Road, and the Conservative Party candidate in Cherritsbrook, which is about a never-ending supply of wealth. So that implies both of the parties have got a very similar position on not solving the deficit. I've read both manifestos. They have the same wording, right down to both saying global Britain after EU exit. So we can't vote for either of them. There's no UKIP candidate because, as you've highlighted in your last item, UKIP are not contesting this election in most parts of the country. There's a Green Party candidate, which I can't brook because that's pure Marxism. So there we are. The only other option for me, and I'll do it right now, is to vote for Martin Horwood of the Liberal Democrats. I never thought I'd vote Lib Dem after age 18, but that's the only option for me to avoid a one-party state fiasco in the country. Spoke to Mr. Horwood once. He was quite a nice chap. He seemed a bit more real world than most. So there we go. And I suggest that people do the same and vote for anyone who's not the Tories that they can stomach.
Yeah.
Alex, I think we've just seen a first there, which is a live vote. Really excellent. Thank you very much for that. Well, let's follow along with this theme. This is really interesting. Some very big billboards going up around the country, but the focus here was on South Wales. Theresa May with one eye showing, if anybody's interested in that. And what's the header there? I am a threat. Well, absolute truth in that. Underneath it says, I'm a threat to education, the NHS, your jobs, etc., etc. So a very powerful billboard. The actual headline was, large billboards calling Theresa May a threat have been spotted in Cardiff. I went into the article, I did a little bit of research, and it tracks back to this, the People's Assembly. very interesting website. It's all a bit glossy. I always get a bit nervous when I see this sort of thing because they're a little bit too good. So I thought I'd have a look at supporters. I couldn't get it on one single shot. I had to take a little video. So let's see if this is going to play. Hopefully it will. And it goes on and on and on. It's unions, it's NGOs, it's funny little charitable organisations. But I think, how can one organisation get all of these people together and apparently united against Theresa May? Well, the good news is that at least they're united against Theresa May. But who is funding this, and how is this movement being put together so quickly? This is where my eye is cast. So just let that get to the bottom, and then we'll quickly move on here and have a look in another direction, because all of this links back to this particular address, the People's Assembly, 52 Beachy Road, London. So what else is there? Well, we've got this PPPS Publishing. We've got here Lextra Limited, William Rust House, 52 Beachy Road. It's all the same address. We've got the Morning Star, that's the powerhouse there. And then we can see other things, links into Keith Taylor, MEP, who's promoting events backed from that same address. And there's another one here. So it's the William Rust House. I've called it the powerhouse, and I'm saying powerhouse for what? Agree that we must stop Theresa May getting re-elected, but who are the people backing this social media campaign?
Let's just quickly have a look over in Europe. And Alex Breitbart here saying more Europe. Germany and France pledged tax harmonization. Is this more offshore tax problems, or is there something else going on here?
There's more to it than that, Mike. This is global. This is UN wanting global ID relevant to each individual, and the corporations are writing the legislation for the UN and the EU. Now that we're apparently leaving the EU, at least formally, it's reduced to the EU having to do this quickly in a Franco-German axis. Although I'm sure we're sticking our finger in the pie somewhere as Britain. And it's also coming out at the same time as news that the Danes and Swedes are going to be told they're going to lose their established opt-outs. Well, the Swedes don't actually have one. The Swedes kept the crown by annual jiggery-pokery at the National Bank. But they're being told now, according to the Commission, that once the Brits are out, you are going to accept the euro. You are jolly well going to have it. We're going to have 27 member states with the euro, and as it looks at the same time, a single EU tax system. Now, if you want to understand that better, look at a series of articles by Bernice Bartels, one of our authors, and you will also find this more directly if you look at series, the menu option on the UK Column website. Look for the 3 lines at the top and expand that. You'll see series. If you then go to One World Governance, then Bernice Bartels' articles, the 4th one coming up soon, is about the global identification of individuals. And her thesis, not in any one of these articles, but her working thesis, which I'll say now, is we're going to be told that there's a global system and it's going to replace or abolish tax by the look of it. That will be the carrot. But the stick will be you will get everything as freebies from the state, and it will be withdrawn from you if you don't like us or if the banks think you are surplus to requirements, and then you can be starved. That seems to be what this planning is part of, and the carrot and stick approach is always in there. So we're going to be told this will allow us to avoid global tax dodging or tax havens. So look out for language like register of beneficial ownership, which is already being spoken about in the Lords.
Patrick, it has to be said that back in 2013, you and I were covering this subject prior to Bilderberg.
Yeah, that was Google's Big Tent event, and there was a series of these confab meetings right around Bilderberg in 2013, and a lot of people weren't looking at these because they were so focused on the Bilderberg meeting, which was held in the UK that summer. But really, this is about harmonization of getting everybody on the same page in terms of implementing a global tax system. And first and foremost, and at the forefront of these efforts are going to be the big digital consortiums. And so all the big players, Google, Twitter, I believe there were British ministers there. I'm not sure if I'm correct or not, but George Osborne was there in some of those closed sessions.
Absolutely,
at that big tent event. So there's government ministers meeting with corporations on the taxpayer time clock, but maybe discussing things that are going to affect everybody's lives going forward into the future, but with zero accountability or any notes from those meetings or any real disclosure about what was discussed, what was agreed, what sort of agendas they're all looking at collectively. And this is all, we're not privy to any of this. But yeah, we were on that story, and it didn't get a lot of attention at the time. So again, what do we know? We're just a bunch of hacks. So, but there you go.
Okay, so anybody wants to find that, have a look for Bilderberg 2013, The Birth of a Global Tax System. That's on the UK Column website, and it's under Patrick Henningsen's byline. So do have a look for that. Right, Alex, we're pretty much out of time, so 5 minutes at most here. Let's have a look at this. We're moving to Ukraine, and what you're calling this is National Front MP in uniform mowing down USSR veterans. We'll start this playing, and you can talk us through it.
Tsar is a member of the National Front there. He is in his military uniform, which he always wears in the Rada, Ukraine's parliament. And there's a debate about the appearance of Soviet-era ribbons, now known in Russia as the Order of St. George, but in the communist period they were called the Order of Glory. And they started appearing after this man's very, very lovely people, the National Front, and their brethren, the Azov Battalion, started losing in Donetsk in the east. In the war there. And so there he is, and you should listen to this if you can find it. He's raging and yelling, "I wish I could mow them all down with a machine gun." And here you can see what's going on the streets, people being called unmentionable words, children seeing their mothers being called bitches and whores, and all because they're wearing, or that their menfolk are wearing ribbons, which the Soviet Union awarded them, in some cases for the defense of Kiev against the Nazis. And here's what the similarity of medals is based on. The one in the middle with the orange fringes at the edge is the Soviet-era Order of Glory. And this is being called supposedly identical to the new Russian restored version of the Catherine the Great-era ribbon, which has got the black on the outside. And this has caused such a nonsense that people have even suggested that tigers may be banned in Ukraine because there we are, someone's tweeting this as a joke. Tigers have the same color scheme, so maybe they're Russian stooges as well. Maybe they should be mowed down with machine guns or banned from Ukraine. It's quite a ridiculous set of circumstances, but you can see what's going on with people like Mr. Biriza in Parliament, just utter radicals. We keep being told not to say Nazis, but these guys really are Nazis. They're hardcore SS Nazi type men in Parliament in uniform, yelling at people to be mowed down with machine guns. If you look at the defence section of our website, I wrote a piece on another Ukrainian member of parliament who's of the same generation and the same attitude, called "Why is Sir Gerald Howarth in bed with Ukraine's Lady Godiva?" And Ukraine's Lady Godiva here, Svitlana Zalishuk, if you read my long read there, she's basically, she was primed for the same purposes by Soros and the EU to move Ukraine radically in this direction. That the shock really is Ukraine is like Turkey. It's on our eastern fringe. It's an endless source of radicalization and terrorism for us, and so things are being foisted from east to west. At the same time, Ukraine has got a bill on the books, which you see here, which is suggesting that church membership is no longer going to be a matter of who's on the church membership lists, but you can, according to this new draft, be defined by a special body of church oversight as a member of a religious community on the basis of going there and lighting a candle or whatever else you want to do. And so this allows people to infiltrate churches, and then that can be used as a pretext to seize them. And believe me, Ukraine is just a laboratory. Soros and the globalists are not interested in Ukraine for its own sake, but as a test bed. So a lot of this will be coming west soon, and you'll find your churches being taken over by large numbers of activists soon, and then the government taking the property off you, I'm quite sure. Also being seen in central Kiev at the moment, as this billboard shows you, is you can see that English slogans are being put up for the benefit of foreigners, not for the natives, saying "freedom is our religion." There's a whole cluster of ideas. You see it in Scotland with the SNP, which is another of the attack prongs, really, of telling people you mustn't be religious anymore. Your religion must be to this idea of a neocon idea of freedom. And so it's all part of the fluid identity stuff that David Scott reported on recently. It's no longer just in gender terms. Fluid identity applies to nationality and even belief in God these days. And it's all judged by state apparatchiks now, no conscience and no membership lists as such. Just to show you more about what the Ukrainian MP I just showed you, Mr. Birizar, he is in himself not of the Azov battalion, but the National Front is very close to them and overlaps in membership, and the Azov battalion is there posing with Mr. Adolf Schicklgruber, better known as Hitler. And there's a lot of pictures like this available on the internet, people posing in SS uniforms of the Azov battalion. These are our allies. Here is a Dutch exam paper. And I know it's being used, but children are being told here to detect what propaganda is. But still, look at the picture of Russia sinking its fangs into Ukraine, which desperately reaches a hand out to the West to be helped. And Europe, with its face in Germany, interestingly, holds out a wonderful welcoming hand to say, come into the club and away from the nasty Russian beast.
What do we say to that, Brian?
Well, I think we're allowed to say, Mike, that we have been warning and warning what's been coming for many years. We can now see it coming to fruition. It's becoming easier to see. And I'm going to add a lot of people saying to us, what should we do? I'll just put my opinion in, is to make sure Theresa May does not get elected, because that buys time. We need time to sort the rest of the mess out. I'm going to say thank you very much, Alex and Patrick, for joining us. It's been really excellent to have you on board. And just say again, thank you very much for people who've given donations recently, both to the UK column, also to the British Constitution Group, and a very generous donation given to, for that very brave Metropolitan Police whistleblower, John Wedger. So thank you very much for that. We will be back at the same time tomorrow. See you then. Bye-bye.